state of fear and misery.
Give us the breaks.
So, I mean, obviously, first up is the Trump tweet. And, like, honestly, I don't really see why anybody would expect Trump to have a different attitude about Bitcoin. I mean, like, he's had a lot of people in his administration who are open or friendly towards it, like especially Peter Thiel on the transition team when he first came into office. So, like, there are definitely a number of Bitcoin fans circling Trump. But I mean, like, just look at his comments on the economy and currency since he first announced his campaign. I mean, it's all been about manipulation, devaluation, and how that affects the import-export ratios and, you know, the greater interaction with the global economy. And he's always been an American nationalist, you know, America first, the dollar first, our economy first. And it's really silly in my mind, you know, aside from the the not serious conspiracy theories about Trump trying to crash the economy to pump Bitcoin. Like, this, you know, he was never going to have any other view other than this. Like, his entire worldview is just not compatible with a world where America does not have that kind of power and influence through the US dollar. Like, he is an American nationalist. That's who he is. That's what he ran on. That's his entire attitude about operating this country. And so, like, this was really the only outcome that was ever going to happen as far as what was Trump going to say if he mentioned Bitcoin. And it's really as simple as that in my mind. Like, ultimately, his opinion about Bitcoin doesn't matter. If it does, then Bitcoin has always been doomed to fail. But, you know, Trump isn't the only one who made comments about Bitcoin over the past week or so, as far as big influential members of the government. You know, Fed Chair Jerome Powell has made a few testimonies regarding Libra that also touched loosely on Bitcoin and other aspects of the economy lately. And one thing that really, or rather two things that really kind of stuck out very largely in my mind as far as his comments were, one, pretty much him terrified of the U.S. government not raising the debt ceiling, which was reimposed on March 1st. And looking at the potential of America defaulting on its debt if this isn't handled by September. And the Treasury literally having to go through prioritization of debt payments and certain investments over others to continue being able to make servicing payments on our debt. But, you know, the other thing is he kind of just nonchalantly, in the context of one of the multiple hearings on Libra, spoke about Bitcoin becoming an actual, you know, money, a means of exchange, a unit of account, and just nonchalantly said, like, yes, he could see a future where Bitcoin took off and we saw the landscape in America change and kind of move back towards the era of national banking, where you had multiple different currencies circulating freely through the United States. And so, you know, I think here in a sec is a good place to kind of talk for a minute about this, but I think it's just interesting to look at, like, the kind of polar opposite view you see with Trump's comments versus Jerome Powell's. I mean, like, regarding Libra, Powell has been, you know, harping on the money laundering and privacy concerns, but I just, you look at Trump saying, like, there is no way Bitcoin will ever succeed. Like, it's worthless. The US dollar will reign supreme forever. And the head of the Federal Reserve Board just nonchalantly says, like, yes, I can see a world where Bitcoin is used widely as a means of exchange. Like, that would not be unusual or unthinkable. And it's just, you know, those two completely polar opposite views in the government.
Well, I mean, like Trump's position, that's like the position he has to take, right? And it's not really Trump's position. I think he would say a different position if he wasn't the POTUS, like, the president of the United States that carries some weight with your words. So you can't just go out there and speak your opinion on certain aspects. I'm sure that he really does love the dollar and believes in the dollar and everything because, he kind of, yeah, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of Trump or anything like that, but I mean, for sure, I think he understands like some of the problems with the country and some of the problems with banking and all that. And I think he understands Bitcoin a little bit to where I don't think he would really take this position unless he kind of had to. I mean, like you're saying, with all these other senators and congressmen in these Libra hearings, man, it was really surprising to hear them talk about permissioned and open public blockchains, and I even heard one of them getting into like talking about GitHub and instances and branches. It was just like, when did these people start really educating themselves on what's going on here? And I'm sure Trump knows what's going on. It's just he's in that seat where he can't take that position of being like, hey, Bitcoin is probably a good thing for markets, but he can't say that. But the Fed chair, I mean, like, he's sitting in a spot where, yeah, if they don't raise the debt ceiling, you start to see some real harsh realities pop into place with the dollar. And I mean, yeah, he's a lot more sober about it, I suppose.
But like that's what I find so interesting, though, Rick, is that logic here I think applies way more to Jerome Powell. I mean, like, yeah, Trump is the president of the U.S., like the most powerful leader in the world, but like
Yeah.
Jerome Powell is the head of the Federal Reserve, and I think like it's just shocking that the head of the Fed would make such a statement just off the cuff, nonchalantly, whereas the president is the one just kind of trying to paint this picture like, no, it's never going to happen. Where like ultimately, despite both being in very high places in the American, bureaucratic machine, like I'd say Powell is much more of a signal that's paid attention to in terms of comments on things like Bitcoin.
I mean, certainly people that are listening to information like, yeah, they're kind of digging through the trees in the forest to see like what real information to go after. But I mean, Jerome Powell is a relatively new Fed chair. I think if Janet Yellen said that, it would probably have more of an effect than Jerome Powell, just because people's association with Yellen in the Fed chair. Like, and Trump, he's just got, I mean, his damn name's Trump. He's got like a megaphone. Every time he says something, whole world hears it. So, I mean, like, yeah, I get what you're saying. It's like, Jerome should probably be holding the same position, or at least speaking that same position as the head of the Fed. But I mean, that's where it's like, yeah, we're in a different time right now. It's 2019, and there's like, politicians that understand Bitcoin, and, at a certain point, there's realities that has to get set in. And I mean, like, the Fed does run the dollar, and the dollar is, I mean, it's not in good place. I mean, like, as far as the market goes, it's good. But I mean, as far as like the US dollar's like, trust that's withheld by other countries, and thinking of what the dollar stands for and how it stands, I mean, that's not that strong. And I mean, like, they're probably preparing for some realities, and that's why they're speaking pretty soberly about all of this. And that's probably why you have somebody like Trump just being very vocal about, like the US dollar is supreme and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are virtual, whatever you want to call it, is all BS,
Yeah. I mean, this week is just really, it's mind boggling in terms of like what it's displaying regarding the attitude about these types of things in government, because you like it's all on full display. Like the Bitcoin is just never going to work. Like we can't let this work. Like there are people being open to it, even supportive of it, and everything in between. I mean, like even Libra, to touch a little bit before we move on to the next thing. You have some congressmen who are like a little hesitant to smash the hammer down on it. Like they're trying to actually be open to what benefits this can bring. And I mean, it's like it's one just an insane indication of just how big this space is getting as far as like interacting with the political system and the economy. But also it's just like, you know, people talk about like the United States banning Bitcoin. Like, you know, it's kind of popular to say just make it illegal and get it over with, but just look at the climate regarding this stuff in Congress. Like, that's not gonna happen. Like, yeah, you have people in Congress who would want to do that, but you have people who would actively want to encourage it, or people on the fence and looking at things more neutrally. Like the entire atmosphere is just absolutely not conducive to outright banning these things or banning Bitcoin without a complete 180 in terms of attitude from a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, like, I really think the idea of this thing being an experiment anymore is kind of beyond that. I mean, it's just like, it really is something where, like you're saying, it's incredible to see this sort of large scope picture of, I mean, because, you know, later on in the show, I'm doing a story on the IMF, and you hear the way they take on Libra and everything. And it's just like, yeah, there's definitely all these little takes in between where it's like some people want this thing to succeed or they want that thing to succeed. And, you know, as far as the United States goes, I mean, like, you know, yeah, there's definitely, you know, a fracturing as far as what people think should be done correctly. I mean, you know, if you look at states like California and New York, and you compare them to states like Texas and Wyoming, I mean, there's a stark difference in what they believe is okay, you know, to implement on their citizens. And yeah, that's going to be something where when this decision time does come, I mean, you know, we're talking about the base layer value system that people are transacting on. I mean, yeah, it could really, you know, we've talked about this several times. I mean, it could fracture the states, you know, people, you know, picking their routes as to how exactly they're going to go with this thing. And, you know, we might see some of these things take off in other areas of the world where, you know, you wouldn't expect them to, or yeah, or maybe you would. So it's definitely a weird position to be in as far as like coming from, you know, you were 2014, I'm like 2015, and now you're here, we're here. It's just like, wow, totally different.
You know, if Trump or any of those senators have a problem with Bitcoin, then luckily Bitcoin is open source, so they can go on GitHub and make a pull request, and then we can discuss if that's a stupid pull request or not.
Yes, it is so good.